welcome. Andrew is telling us, Andrew's here with us also doing tech support. Thank you very much to Andrew. And we are convening a conversation today called Being Traditionally Religious and LGBTQ plus Affirming as a Person and as a Parent. And this is in conjunction with our focus, our DEI focus for the next month or so, and our annual campaign on the LGBTQ plus programming. So before we get started, I'm going to just take care of a little bit of housekeeping. The ways to engage, you're already using one of them. That is the chat. And that's our primary way usually, honestly. If you just be sure that you address your chat message to everyone, because otherwise only Letechia and I and Andrew will see it. And people like to be able to track with what people are saying. So the other thing is, if you want to raise your hand, some of our questions when we get to the end and we ask questions, some of our questions are kind of, could have longer answers than just, you might want to type in the chat. So if you want to speak, you can raise your hand, we'll unmute you, and you'll need to unmute yourself to be heard. And again, our webinar series are always about co-creating safe space together to talk about things and move our ideas forward. The next slide, Andrew, please. It's not like we're the experts. We give a little context and then we launch into questions typically. And we really want everybody's voice to be heard and everyone to feel comfortable and safe sharing. So we have these agreements. Speak from your own experience, treat other people the way you want to be treated. We ask that you just give us your attention, your full attention. And if you need a minute, take a minute. So for anything, if you agree to the agreements, do like Andrew did and type I agree into the chat. We have a small but mighty group today, but this will be available on our YouTube channel afterwards. So you are welcome to refer friends or colleagues or anybody. Great. We've got Paula. Hi, Paula, Debbie, Jennifer, wonderful. So let's get started. Oh, I was saying this is our Show Your Love for Families. Our annual campaign is going on now. So we ask you to go to our website and make a donation if you want to support Be Strong Families and the work that we're doing. So the context for this being traditionally religious and LGBTQ plus affirming. Does anybody, has anybody seen this? Next slide, please. Has anybody seen this? Raise your hand or tell us in the chat if this looks familiar to you. If not, okay, no. If not, this is a little comedy to get us started. All right, some no's. Okay, so let's a little comedy to get us started.
Oh, hold on just a minute there, Buster.
Dad, I'm supposed to pick up Emily in like 10 minutes. I gotta go.
Well, Emily can wait for a little bit, can't she? You got a minute to talk to your old man, don't you? Have a seat. You know, son, you're not a kid anymore.
Oh, no, I go to health class, Dad. I already know all this stuff.
Well, they don't teach you about everything in health class. Okay, Mr. Smarty Pants? So just listen. When boys and girls get a little older, they start getting interested in one another, right?
You know, and non-binary people, agendered, intergendered, FTX, gender fluid people.
What?
There's more than just boys and girls now, Dad. And they're not girls, they're women.
Yeah, okay, sure. Well, my point is that sex is it's a very important decision.
How are you defining sex? Sex is different things to different people.
I guess when a penis goes into a vagina.
What if there's 2 men or 2 women or more?
More?
How would you define sex with multiple simultaneous partners? Or what if somebody's undergone genital reconstruction or is intersex?
No, but I'm just talking about normal, straight...
Normal? Come on, Dad.
Okay, here we go. Let me ask you this. Son, are you attracted to women?
Yes, but I'm young.
Is Emily a woman?
Biologically.
Okay, you're attracted to women. Emily's a woman. So if you were to have sex with Emily...
I wouldn't just have sex with Emily. We'd have to make that decision together. Homecoming's not an excuse to ignore consent.
I'm not saying to ignore consent. I never said ignore consent. You and Emily, right? Consensually decide to have sex.
Vaginal?
Yes, vaginal.
Just two of us.
How many people do you want? Yes, just the two of you, Colin.
And I'm playing the traditional male role?
Go to homecoming.
You seem like you really wanted to talk about this.
No, I don't want to talk about anything. Ever again.
So I can go.
Please do. Out. Thank you. Don't forget your corsage.
Hey, Dad.
Yeah.
How do I look?
You look very handsome, son.
That's gender coding, but...
Get out of my house! Have fun.
Okay. What do we think of that? That was great, Jennifer says. I think we chose it just because it can be a deep and heavy conversation. It also is just, you got to be able to laugh at the situation. And I think that what I thought was powerful about it is just the generation gap and how different things can be for parents and for grandparents versus what kids are experiencing and what kids are experiencing about sex, about gender, the choices that they have, and the opportunity to explore who they are. Hi, Luan. Nice to see you. Letechia, did you like the video?
I really love this video because it's just so funny, just the expression of the parent as he's trying to have the normal, birds and the bee kind of conversation, and just how informative his son was. And just, it was a change of knowledge between the both of them, what was tradition versus the now understanding, and just how well versed the son was in sharing that information. And he was so firm with it. And it's great to see parents be engaged in that type of conversation, and to also, be open and keep a kind of neutral ground, which is the closing part. I think is what I love the most, is that when he was getting ready to go to the dance and his dad telling him that he looked great. And then he finally said, that's gender neutral as well. So he was like, I don't know what to say.
So just an acknowledgement that we can get into, that this can be tough. It can be tough conversations for everybody. So let's go to the next slide, Andrew, please. And we want to give a little bit more context about love. Jennifer says love, yes. So a little bit of context. I found a couple of things when we were looking into, at organizations that were trying to assist families and children. And I think one of the things that's very important about the issue when children feel rejected by their parents, then negative things happen. And that one of 3 youth in foster care is LGBTQ+, and they end up in foster care often because of a lack of acceptance by their parents of who they are. And then the other thing, and the Human Rights Campaign has a program called All Families, All Children, All Families, where it's trying to engage child welfare system agencies to be LGBTQ+ affirming, to engage prospective parents who are LGBTQ+. This is interesting because 84% of the adults surveyed say they would consider adoption or foster care in the future, but very few agencies have a pool, so to speak, of LGBTQ+ foster parents or adoptive parents that could step in and be there for the teens. So the HRC is this All Children, All Families campaign. And there's about 150 some programs that are participating, and it's part of affirming safety, permanency, and well-being. And I just think it's important that we know about these resources and understand the stakes for kids that are not affirmed by their parents. So next slide, or their families. And the Human Rights Campaign, they're working with the social workers, and one of their, this is full disclosure, I got the idea for this this webinar from their most viewed podcast, which is Traditionally Religious and LGBTQ plus Affirming, How Social Workers Can Help Families Be Both. So they have that podcast. I tried to watch it. It was very difficult, didn't work on my machine, but I thought, you know what? We're Be Strong Families. We can talk about it. We can have this conversation and we can figure out how to navigate this. How do we navigate being traditionally religious and LGBTQ plus affirming? And how are other people navigating it? How are congregations navigating it? Where does this exist? So the next slide, please. The other resource that I found when I was doing research for this is the Family Acceptance Project. Do people know about the Family Acceptance Project? In the chat, if you just say if you've heard of it, or anybody who's heard of it. You know, it's out of the University of San Francisco, or it's out of, is it USF or is it San Francisco? I think it's USF. In San Francisco, and they've been working for more than 10 years. Jennifer says she's used their material a lot. And their mission is to increase family acceptance and support for LGBTQ plus children, youth, and young adults. And they have this, they have award-winning videos on their website, which are there for you to watch as well. Just like we always like to give some resources, a little bit of depth. Next slide. This is their research when they researched the issue. Oh, this is an article in the Washington Post about parents not having to choose between their faith and their LGBTQ plus kids. So, and it cites the Family Acceptance Project, finding that highly religious families were most likely to use religion to reject their LGBT children and were least likely to accept them. And many families, traditionally religious families, respond to their LGBT and gender diverse children by isolating them, preventing access to support, and sending them to clergy and providers to try to change their identity, and using religion to condemn or deny their LGBT identity. And so I think, and you can see that young people, this is what we're saying, during adolescence are more than 8 times as likely to attempt suicide during young adulthood, and 6 times as likely to report high levels of depression as non-rejected peers. So the other thing I think is important is that these parents are not trying to hurt their kids. Next slide, please. The Family Acceptance Project has found that of 10 years developing their family support model, that the parents who are rejecting these children are typically motivated by trying to help them, not hurt them. They're trying to help them fit in, trying to help them have a good life. They're upholding their beliefs and their values, and they end up pushing children away and reinforcing isolation and risk. I think this is a very important point, because if you go to the previous slide and you read about how they're denying access, the way it's framed, they're denying access. Please go to the previous slide, Andrew, for a second. Families isolating them. So these families are isolating their kids. They're preventing access to support. They're sending them to people to get them to change their identity, and they're condemning and denying. These are all very strong words, and it makes it sound as if that, and it ends up in rejection, or it feels like rejection. And the strength of those words make it sound like the parents are really, evil, or they're trying to do harm to their children. And so what to me is really most important to understand going into this is that these parents are often not trying to hurt their children. They're trying to help their children. And they can't. The fact is they can't. They don't have the resources to be able to do so because of where they are. So they need a bridge. And this is where the Family Acceptance Project comes in. It's where all of us can come in. It's where some congregations come in, is to say you don't have to choose between your child and your faith. You don't have to condone an identity or behavior you don't accept, but there are other religious values like respect, mercy, compassion, other places in the Bible, other places in your sacred text where you can find a path to be able to accept your child or embrace your child and love your child, even if you don't agree with or condone their particular identity or behavior. And again, the research that the Family Acceptance Project did also says compassion is essential, and that you have to have compassion for the parents as well. And that showing, this is what we know from family support, right? It's got to be a parallel process. They didn't use the words parallel process, but the whole idea here is if I'm working with a family that is not LGBTQ affirming, I need to have compassion for them and where they are and the struggle that they're encountering with the clash between their values and their children's behavior, with the grief that they're experiencing for their child choosing a different path, or their identity having a different path, or having an identity that is foreign to them, that this is tough for them. And as we accept and acknowledge that and work with the parents, we're also modeling how they can work with their children. So the compassion is essential and educational is vital. So it just seems that there's a lot of and I think that we could see this watching the video. I don't know if anybody watching the video was like, what's that? What's that intersex? What's that FB, the initials? I mean, I'm just going to be real, because I think sometimes when it's like as charged a topic, you can easily feel stupid if you don't know something. You can easily feel like it's a really foreign world, and most people are uncomfortable feeling stupid. So the thing is that education has to be delivered in a way that's respectful and understand the differences between sexual orientation and gender identity. Like the father we saw in the first thing, he's like, I'm just talking about normal. I'm talking about normal. And there's a new normal, but not everybody knows what the new normal is. And this is the other key thing about education being vital, which is that it's not all about willful behavior and sexuality. And when we look at it, or when parents look at their children's behavior through that lens, like they have a choice and they're choosing this thing, and they're choosing this thing that's totally not in line with my values or my beliefs, and there's somehow this is a rebellion, and they have a choice that they're really not understanding that developing a sexual identity, developing a gender identity is normative child development, and that there's not one way that plays out. There's not only one way that plays out. There's not only one normal way for that to play out. So Caitlin Ryan, who's from the Family Acceptance Project, says supporting our LGBT, in this article again in the Washington Post, said supporting our LGBT and gender diverse children is not just about protecting them from harm. It's about promoting their well-being, developing their strengths and abilities, and most importantly, helping their families accept and nurture them. So I'm just going to open it up for a minute to conversation in the chat or raising hands. And I think that's the last of our context slide. Is that right, Andrew? Is that correct? Oh, we have one more. Sorry, Letitia's going to do this one. One more of our context slide.
So thanks, Katthe. So this particular slide is taken from some information that was taken from the St. Hugh's of Lincoln Episcopal Church. And what they did was they actually put together as a member, body of members, a collection of scriptures that they compiled to address some of the issues that the LGBTQ family members within their church have experienced. Just as Katthe was talking about earlier, a lot of times as parents and families, we look forward to help our children or help our family member, and a lot of times we wind up hurting them. So they outlined took the time to outline and went through some of those traditional scriptures that we know of that usually ideally condemn the LGBTQ community or transgender community, and to talk about it from what the Bible perspective and versus the perspective or their truths and what that has meant. Taking some time to actually click on this resource or go and visit this resource, it's really one that holds very dear to me, because it's just a different spin on, what we're traditionally taught or told versus how do we bring our own feelings and emotions, and how do we actually take in consideration what our child or loved one is actually experiencing and going through, and then how do we absorb that for ourselves. So it's a great read, and it covers a number of things about relationship and provides a whole enormous of resources. But it's great to see a church who actually is considering this and thinking about how do you serve the community as a whole, and not just to keep people separated, or that isolation, as we earlier had talked about.
Great. So the clobber verses are there, but also the messages of love and inclusion. And so to get people thinking. And that's what we find in cafes and in other places. Like our whole mission at Be Strong Families is kind of to get people thinking, to get them to question, to make some space between what they already think and how to expand that. So how to expand that to be able to address new situations. So the next slide, please. Oh, this is the questions, but I just wondered, if people in the chat, my first question is, what are you thinking about the context of the HRC information, the Family Acceptance Project information, the Bible verses? Where are you with all of this? Andrew's saying interested in speaking. Raise your hand and he can unmute you, and you can type your answer in the chat. And I can never tell if people are busily typing in the chat, and so greatly encouraged. Jen says, okay. Well, maybe we'll go to some questions. These are questions that, will hopefully, it's not going to just be a conversation between Letechia and me, but if it is, that's okay too. So we're going to ask, what is your experience reconciling your religious beliefs with your child's non-conforming sexuality or gender identity? So, and this can be, I guess we could expand it to others that you've seen, but what is your experience with the whole issue of reconciling your religious beliefs with your their child's or someone's you love's non-conforming sexuality or gender identity? Debbie says she's glad to be getting the resources. I've not found much yet. And Jennifer says, I think my biggest struggle is starting the conversation with parents where they will be open to hearing the information.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point, Jennifer. I think about my mom, when, trying to have the conversation with my mom about family members and how initially closed she was, but it helped a lot to understand my uncle, which was her only brother on her mom's side, who was also a part of the LGBTQ community, and his feelings towards relationship and what that meant to him and what that looked like helped to open her up into a place of understanding. But she also became very close when it came to her own children.
What's your experience, Letechia, with reconciling religious beliefs with a child's non-conforming sexuality or gender identity?
So my experience in this is very interesting enough that I actually was in search of a church home that was accepting to all people. I grew up in the traditional Christian Baptist, a faith where they wasn't so as accepting. And this was really important for me because at the time I really didn't know that, that I was going to have children who would be in this kind of fall into this category. But I also knew that I was raised to be accepting and open to all people, no matter what their gender or sexuality or culture was. And so being in the traditional faith was a little challenging for me because of the isolation, because of the closed-mindedness. So being in search of a church home or place of faith that I could be openly accepted and welcomed about my differences and how I felt about people in general was really important. And so that search was kind of bittersweet. It was hard because it was pulling me away from what I traditionally know, but it also was rewarding at the same time, because it was great to know that you could be in a place that served and worship and had a strong belief, and it was open to all people and acceptive to no matter what your gender or what your sexuality was, is that we're all created in the image of God, and that in his image we have a uniqueness, and we are all welcome to that same love. Yes.
Love, Jennifer says, and Debbie says, I'm a youth leader, and for the first time for me, this is coming up with our kids. It's the rest of the church I'm hoping to help learn. Yeah, and I guess, I mean, I've always gravitated towards religious, or my spiritual journey has been eclectic, but I have at different times in my life been pretty traditionally religious and been part of congregations that were, it was always important to me to be part of a congregation that wasn't judging, like that the vibe wasn't like you're looking for something to exclude people based on, or to talk, or to make people feel bad. I mean, I always thought the message of love is what it's supposed to be about, and community. So, and I had a father-in-law, Allah Shalom, he's not alive anymore, and he was a rabbi of a Reform congregation for his whole career, and except for a brief stint or maybe a decade stint at Hillel at Yale. But his thing was, I don't know if people know, but in Jewish religion, there's 613 commandments, 613 in the Torah, in the Bible. And Orthodox Jews, or Jews are supposed to be following these rules, and his point was always, as a rabbi, his point was, nobody follows all of them. Nobody follows all of them. And so as you're walking, he said, as you're walking on Jew Street, you pick which ones you're taking on. And that's just real. It's just practical. So it's like, and also we are, judge not that you be not judged. So we are told, like, that part of what we're supposed to be doing is loving each other and embracing each other and being a community. And discriminating against people or making them, isolating them or ostracizing them just never made sense in terms of that value. Like, what's the point of being part of a congregation if you're going to feel judged?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why it's like, look, there are people who move congregations, right? For all kinds of reasons. They move, they get in a fight with the minister, or the rabbi. They don't like the way that the money is being spent. There's all different kinds of reasons that people leave congregations and go to other ones. And so I think, especially if the way that things are opening up now, there are options, there's choices. So, and in terms of my beliefs, I guess I'm just saying, like, one of my beliefs is that everybody has their own journey. It's not like and that is a Jewish belief also, that everybody writes their own Torah. There's something that said in the Talmud that everybody writes their own Torah, which is like that everybody has their own journey. Everybody has to make their own choices. And that if I love someone, like I love my child, my goal is to try to be as supportive and loving as possible, and trust that, that love and that guidance that I've given all along is going to assist them with making positive choices. And I'd much rather see, personally, regardless, this is going to be heretical, but come on, regardless of what the text says, because I think the text says a lot of different things, I would rather see my child in a relationship in a positive relationship with someone that respects them and loves them and assists them being their best self than I would want them to be in a relationship with someone who is just the right gender.
Yes,
So I mean, that's just how I think about it.
yes. And thank you for saying that, Katthe, because, as I said earlier, I'm a mom of a lesbian daughter who is engaged to be married next year. Have been with my daughter-in-law that I'm so grateful and blessed to be adding to our family, and a new grandson that we love very dearly. And I also have a bisexual daughter. And she have relationships with both men and women. And, they're happy. They're happy. Their life is well, and they're doing well. And they take the time to do those very things. They oftentimes say, Mom, we are grateful for your openness because it helps us to be open. And by them being parents and raising children in and a part of the LGBT community, that they take the stance that it doesn't mean, which some kids and people are very mean to say, because you have gay or homosexual parents, or then that means your child is going to be that way. But the difference in how they're teaching them and the conversations they're having is that it's okay for them to be who they are. Like, whatever that means to them, it's okay, and that they're going to be accepted. And that's the biggest part that hurt me about my mom becoming so close, that really encouraged me to want to be so open with my children, so that they know that it didn't matter what what their gender was, or what their sexuality was, but that they were going to be loved unconditionally. And that they have a family that supports them and uplifts them and going to celebrate with them, and we cry together and whatever that is, but that we will stand affirm and affirmative. And I feel like I'm a greater parent because of that, because I get to see that joy in them. So there is no greater joy I can feel than to know that they are happy in their accomplishments, and that I have happy and joyous grandchildren. So yes, for openness and honesty.
That's beautiful, Letechia. It's also like what struck me as you were speaking is I was thinking, isn't that how God is described? The unconditional love that God has for, that's part of every religion, right? That we are loved unconditionally by the Creator, and we are accepted unconditionally by the Creator. That's the concept of grace also, and that we're going to do things that are counter to what is even in our best interest sometimes. And I'm not saying that that's true of the LGBTQ community, but I'm just saying, like, unconditional love is huge, and being able to model that as a parent to a child is similar to the idea of what our relationship with God is, isn't it? I mean, you're traditionally religious, yes? You go to church and active member of your congregation. I thought so, yes.
Yes, I am. I am an active member, serving in a number of roles and in number of capacities, and one of them is about community. So that welcoming into community. And so whenever there's differences or people feel unwelcome or unaccepted for whatever that reason is, this is a way to talk about what our church stance is as it relates to that. Now, meaning that there are some of the practices that my current church home does not indulge in, but we don't turn anyone away. We allow people to have that space to be who they are. And that's one of the things that I love about our pastor in the church home that I'm a part of.
And Jennifer's saying, thank you for that. I've seen a change in the congregations in my traditional Catholic upbringing, deferring greatly toward loving our kids and families as critical to honoring faith. So that's beautiful. It's also a deep thing you said there, Jen, which is like loving each other, loving kids, loving families, being central and critical to what it means to be a faithful person, what it means to honor faith. I think that's a beautiful statement. Let's go to the next question, Andrew.
And Katthe, I just want to say to Jennifer, Jennifer, I think that you two would really enjoy the read about the churches and different churches and their orientation and stance, and you will see that many of the traditional faith and religions, that they are starting to look at this community and the process and see, what are those things that they could do to be more supportive, like St. Hugh's did as well. So it's great to see that there are those different religious backgrounds and faiths is taking this on to, not be exclusive, although there are some churches that's not moving on their stance, and it just is what it is.
Yeah, and I think there's also often a difference between the stance and the practice. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think I've seen that not only in churches, but, like laws on the books that are outdated and that aren't followed necessarily, but they're just not going to be removed from the books. Do you know what I mean? So I think we have a lot of power as congregants to act a certain way, to act the way that we feel goes along with our, core faith. And that's how institutions shift, things become. So there's a thank you, Anna. You're welcome, Jennifer. So we've been exploring this already, what our experiences with congregations that are LGBTQ plus welcoming. To those of you, I guess I would ask Debbie, in your church where you're the youth leader, do you feel, is your church LGBTQ welcoming, or are they, when you say you're hoping to help them learn, are they interested in learning? What's the, and maybe you don't want to answer specifically, but other people, what's your experience with congregations that are welcoming? Debbie says, some are welcoming. My pastor is good. Most members are not. Others? Debbie has her hand raised, so let's hear from Debbie.
Hi.
Welcome.
So I've had this come up very recently with, our youth group usually has always inherently been just the kids that come to church. And me and my husband have been trying to get community kids coming. And so now we have a big mix. We have 20 kids now, where we only had like between 6 and 8 before. And it came up the other day, like one of the girls just said she asked her girlfriend out, or she asked a girl out. And the other youth leader looked shocked. And I was like, Rod, we have to talk to her. Like, we have to deal with our youth leader, not the child, obviously. Mm-hmm. And I still don't even know how to approach it with her, because I don't know where it's going to go with her, like how she's going to react to what we have to say, that we're all good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a hard one, right? I don't know who the other youth leader is, but I know it doesn't work to try to convince people to be something that they're not. I know questions work better, Yeah. But that's a tough one. Thank you for sharing your experience. And I hope that this will be useful in some way. And Jennifer says it varies based upon the priest. The congregation is more open. So I think we have some people who have an experience where the pastor is good and the congregation is more closed. And then other people have it where the congregation is more open and the leader is not. So let's go to the next slide. We have more questions and time is running out. So here we go with what Bible verses help you. I mean, this is an assumption that we have mostly, Christian, Jewish people on the call. That's typically what the Be Strong Families community is. But if you have a different sacred text, like if you're a Muslim and we want to welcome you, and it could be the Quran, it could be the Bhagavad Gita, anybody's sacred text. What are some verses from spiritual sacred texts that help you with this issue? Andrew says, if I have the gift of prophecy and I can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains but have not love, I am nothing.
So I typed in the chat Matthew 19:4, verse 4, and then 12, which reads as that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female. And then in verse 12 it says, for there are Enosh who were born that way, and there are Enosh who have been made Enosh by others, and there are those who choose to live like Enosh for the sake of the kingdom. So that one just speaks to me that that it doesn't matter what the gender or what the gender is or sex is that we are all in this existence together, and that we're all we were all created the same way, and that we're all in this together, and we don't have to be different.
I'm going to put some in here too. And I pronounce that word eunuchs.
Well, eunuchs.
Yeah, like okay. So but I don't know, you could be right. So I think always like the basics, like love your neighbor as yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That one helps me. And then also just like judge not that you be not judged.
Mm-hmm.
That's another good one. Who else has one? Write it in the chat.
And nothing can separate us from the love of God.
Yes, basics works best with all. Nothing can separate us from the love of God. That seems like it would be a very important message. What verse is that, Letechia?
The one I just quoted is from Romans 8:38.
8:38. That would seem like it would be a very important verse for anybody whose child was identifying as part of the LGBTQ plus community and was experiencing discrimination or hatred. Because that I think is really important to that where people could be being mean to you or being bullying or being cruel, that God loves you, in a traditional religious perspective. God loves you, being separated from the love of God would be that I think may be a way that in a traditional religious context you could show people that or have them think about what they're doing if they try to separate a person from the love of God. Like if they try to isolate somebody, or they try to tell them that they're wrong and they're judging them as if, you're not God, we're not God, right? We're not, that's not, there's also other verses and I'm not thinking of them, but it's kind of like, do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly. That's Micah, right?
Mm-hmm.
Justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God, right? Isn't that you have that one, Letechia?
The Michael one you just read?
Yeah. Why I thought that was right? Why I thought that was relevant is because it's talking about compassion or mercy. It's talking about love, and it's talking about us being humble. So us not putting ourselves in the place of God to judge people, but our job is to walk humbly with God. So whenever you're getting out of that humility space to be able to judge or be cruel or be, cause harm to another human being, that you are arguably not, you've deviated from your path that you're supposed to be on, and you're putting yourself in a position that isn't what the text says that you're supposed to be doing.
Right.
And Jennifer says, so well said, being separated from the love of God is not possible. And if you're trying to make it possible, then what are you doing? You know, like, that's when you have to stop yourself in your tracks and say, okay, that's not what I intended. You know, this is triggering. Others, anybody else have one? Any favorite Bible verses that help in this? I know you have more, Letechia.
I do. I was trying to give others
Romans
opportunity.
12:3. What's Romans 12:3?
All right, let us look at that one. Who is that? Put that. Debbie, you want to say that one out loud?
Or write it in the chat. For
Yeah.
by the grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment in accordance with the faith God has distributed to each of you. So that's like a get over yourself one. So just be careful. Awesome. Let's go to the next question. I think the point is, and if you read the link that Letechia put in there, is that we can find things in our sacred texts that, and this is what the Family Acceptance Project was saying too, if you pull out the things that are about inclusivity, about not, you know, about being a community, if you pull out the ones that are about love, if you pull out the ones that are about compassion, rather than pull out the ones that say, thou shalt not lie with a man the way that one, you know, if you pull out there's a balance there, that there's a balance. And even if something is not correct, according to the Bible, according to one rule or one law, you know, whatever, it still doesn't say that your job is to exclude that person or condemn that person or hurt that person. So what's the best thing a clergy member or faith community member has said or done to assist you? Letechia, what's the best
When
thing?
I think about the best thing is be supportive. And that's how we actually chose our first church home. Who was very supportive, who was very open, who was, and not only that, but there were actually memberships, leadership that was actually in the LGBTQ community as well. And they were treated no different than anyone else. You know, those same principles and there were families. You know, that was also in the congregation, and no one was separated. It wasn't like, okay, you know, all of the, you know, lesbian, gay, or transgender, you know, everybody sit over here, or, you know, and people sit over here. Everyone was mixed amongst each other. Everyone congregated together, fellowship together, and it wasn't that set apart. Even in the messaging that was, you know, would go across the sermons, that would be inclusive sermons that wasn't like separate. You know, it would talk about the difference, to say that, you know, we have all fallen, you know, have sinned and fallen short of the glory, and that we all have to be reconciled unto God. And it's like, it doesn't matter whether you know, whether you have a different sex or gender, or if it doesn't matter if you was the adulterer, or if you was out there the abuser, or whatever the case may be, we all is in this together. Yes, and that you're welcome. Everyone is welcome. We are a church for all people and welcome all people, and that was the mantra.
Debbie says her pastor validated her husband, and she when we let them know our feelings and thoughts. What were your feelings and thoughts, Debbie? Okay, let's go to the next slide. That anyone can be part of our youth group. Nice. So I think these are questions, I think, for parents of children who are non-conforming gender or sexuality. How have you come to terms with your child's gender or sexuality? And then the other question, the last question is similar to that. You put it up, Andrew. How is your acceptance different when it isn't your child? And I think we put these together because it's like, that's another like little wedge in conversation with people. If they have one, and it could go either way, right? It could be like, well, I, like you were talking, Letechia, that your mother, when it was her child, she felt one way, but when it was her brother, she felt another way. And it could go either way. It's like, this is my child, and so I need to, but when a child is accepted, it usually the ripples out to be accepting of other people as well, because you want your child's friends and you want your child's community, you start learning and being more comfortable in those kinds of contexts.
When I think about this first question, Katthe, the how have you come to terms with your child's gender or sexuality, is kind of I'm thinking about this now, like, I really see that this was a difference, because on one hand, when I had the conversation, I felt more inquisitive and wanted to know more about the choice. My one daughter, who is bisexual daughter, what made her, want to be engaged in two different type of relationships. And, on the funny part of it, it's more like, well, why not? Men look at it as a sense of pleasure, all the time. And like, this is like a fantasy, right? And so, she was like, I get to live out both because I'm pleased by both. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. So I didn't know to expect that. But then she also said, why do we have to, she felt like, why did she have to choose between what was more pleasing? Because it left her open to wherever her heart of love was going to go. So whether that was with man or with woman, but she did not want to close the door on that because she was still in that. But she just wind up over time just realizing that she didn't want to choose or felt like she needed to choose, and that it's okay for her to be on both sides. So I don't think she'll ever really marry, but heck, who knows? And then on the other hand, I have my daughter who is that's engaged, and she also was with men early on, but she was never happy. And it really wasn't about them as an individual. She just never was happy, or didn't never feel like that love and that joy was brought out of her. And she felt like she was able to be more of herself, being that she was in in a lesbian relationship, and she felt more, and she just lit up. So she felt like she was a part of her community, and that's where she was able to thrive in, and people understood her in that way. So different, both different perspectives and how they see each other. And it's just really interesting, just to think about that now, and to think about the conversations they have and how loving it is towards each other. And they always come reaffirming to each other to say, there are some people in this world that can be very cruel, to them being who they are. But as long as they have the foundation that they have, they feel like they're able to stand for who they are and who they really want to be, and not because somebody else want them to be something different.
Thank you, Letechia.
You're welcome.
And I think, I think like when you're talking about your daughter who's bisexual and saying she's not going to marry, that she's enjoying both sides. I think that there are some people, I think, that withdraw from people and don't have relationships because they don't know who they are, or they're afraid to be, their body or their soul is telling them one thing and society is telling them another, or their messages that they have internalized in their heads from society are telling them another, and so they just stay alone, and I guess when I think of my my child's gender or sexuality. I just want them to be able to be in a loving, caring relationship with somebody. And I don't, and deep and feel and intimate and feel happy and accepted. And to me, it really doesn't matter if that's the person, what gender the person is, and like that little boy was saying at the beginning, if it's, I think when I did research on gender, and this is maybe interesting to some people, in the 1968 Olympics, they had to decide what is a man and what is a woman because there was a doping scandal. And they found that there's like 9 different ways you can think about, the just sex, just whether you are male or female, because there's hormones, there's secondary sex characteristics, there's primary sex characteristics. So I guess I would put it out there that it's not so clear as, as your genitalia determines what sex you are, that all of us, when you think of masculine and feminine, there's been Native American indigenous societies where they affirmed like 5 genders. There's male, female, male who's more like a female, female who's more like a male, and trans, and they make it where, like it's just acknowledging that there's a whole continuum of how people are and who people are. And so I really think like the pansexual idea of like, I'm going to be with, and the opening up to other people's, just people being able to be who they are. I've also known people who say, I don't ask my lover about their pronouns right now, because it's like identifying what you are isn't as important as relating to each other as people. And Andrea says, I'm so proud to have a close relationship with all my children. I do have a child who has come to me to let me know they're gay. I'm in awe of their confidence. They know exactly who they are, and they have a great circle of supportive peers. I've never made their sexuality an issue. I've accepted them for them and let them know that I want them to be happy. I want them to have respectful and supportive partners, and that if they ever need my love and support, they have it. Oh, so beautiful.
Yes.
So beautiful. That's like a perfect comment to end on, and thank everybody for being here. Next slide, Andrew.
Yes.
So what do we want to amplify coming out of this conversation? When you think of just this conversation, what's the word that you would want to amplify? One is compassion, but what are you thinking, like one word that comes out of this? Amplify love, happy and accepted. Amplify happy, amplify accepted. Nice. Other people can write other things that you're thinking about. Hashtag amplify what's coming out of this conversation. The next slide, Andrew. Okay. Show your love for families. Donate to our annual campaign. There's the link right in the chat. And then webinar is coming up next week. I mean, tomorrow we do English one day, Spanish the next. The Spanish webinar tomorrow with Hector Salazar is on El mundo interno y externo de la comunidad LGBT+. So the world, the internal and external world of the LGBT community. We have a Taste of Cafes on Friday. Accept everyone for who they are. Thank you. Hashtag Laura. Amplify, accept everyone as who they are. Perfect. And then next week, we have a couple of parents' journeys. Nick Clinton Elliott is I'm going to get it wrong, but he is the executive director. He's on our National Parent Cafe leadership team, and he's the executive director of the LGBTQ Center of the Ozarks. And he's going to be talking about being a gay parent. And then on Wednesday, Christine is going to be talking about parenting her teen who identifies as trans. And she's using only her first name because she's not ready, because of members of her family directly related to what this conversation, she'll tell you if you're on that webinar, but directly related to this conversation is in this journey, there's some of her family that don't know, there's some of her family who aren't accepting. So she doesn't want to be Googled and outed, but she's going to be able to talk. And yes, Laura, you can get a certificate for today. Andrew, do you want to let Laura know how to do that? And is that it? Is that what we, oh, and then, yes, subscribe to us on YouTube. And follow Be Strong Families on YouTube. And if you liked this conversation, you're welcome to share it with people in your network. Thank you. Thank you for this. Thank you for being here, Jennifer, and participating. And thank you, everybody, for being here and for sharing your thoughts and supporting each other. And we'll see you next time.